Good morning and happy new year, ladies and gentlemen. It's Patrick Lovell, Truth Bomb, riffing the con on none other than New Year's Day, Monday, January 1st, 2024 at 12:30ish my time. First quarter of some of the games that are out there, including the Oregon Ducks finally pulling in front of Liberty, which I was looking forward to this contest considering that I know nothing about Liberty, never heard of Liberty, but then again, they got a 13-0 record, ranked in the top 25, playing the Oregon Ducks on January 1st, and I'm like, what? And then they were winning for most of the first quarter. So, yeah, even underdogs can get ahead for a short time against some of the blue bloods, but it doesn't look like it's going to last for long. I'd give you a toast with champagne, but I've only got coffee. Nursing a little bit about what the rest of us experienced, of course, normally on a New Year's Day. I'm so sorry. Got a little bit of a frog in the throat. So, Happy New Year. My New Year's resolution is to go forward with everything I've got, to get it to you in a way that I don't look over my shoulder or wonder, why isn't it happening? It doesn't matter. It's just got to make it happen. And that's why I chose to put Oppenheimer on the cover of this or I should say, is its photo nail for this truth bomb, because what I'm providing you literally is the opportunity to create a Manhattan-like project to purge corruption, and that's what I have to do because there is no time left. I was watching earlier this morning as I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to say. First of all, I wanted to say 2023 was a mess. It went by like an eye blink, but at the same time, in terms of penetrating for me, the millions of people that I'm trying to get this information to hasn't happened quite yet. In fact, the goalpost keeps getting moved and things keep getting weirder and weirder by the day, and yet I'm still in the same space. And I was hearkening to this revelations of all things, Julian Assange recently. And I know that many people are very concerned about Julian Assange, and should be, but if you're not familiar with the case, Julian Assange created WikiLeaks and revealed a lot of state secrets back in 2011, including internal mechanics of political sort of initiatives or communication between, like, let's say, Hillary Clinton and her chief of staff and others that the United States government was not very happy about, particularly information that came out of Iraq with regards to, Apache helicopters taking out people that were basically throwing up their hands and surrendering on the battlefield and many more scenarios. But Julian Assange got arrested. I think he's been in prison for 4 years. He's definitely being charged with the Espionage Act. Looks like they're going to bring him back from England at some point, and there's a chance that he might face solitary confinement, which for the crimes of actually providing truth to a population around the world, particularly in the United States, where the American people need to understand what's going on with their government to hold it accountable. I'm on the side of free speech, and I always have been. But at the same time, I did kind of buy for a while, is Julian Assange an actual journalist, or is he a, chaos agent? I don't think it really matters when you understand the information, because the journalists weren't able to provide that information. So he got that information, he was able to, make it public, and then the next thing you know, he's being charged with the Espionage Act. So the point being that there's a lot of people, including some very powerful people at the apex of, let's say, modern media, that want to use that scenario to illustrate what they stand for. And for example, one of the oddities of this whole scenario is somebody like Tucker Carlson, who's pretty much all in on Julian Assange, considering who I think Tucker Carlson probably is. But I'll get to that maybe briefly. Don't want to really spend too much time on it, but other than that, there are networks in place, and there has been, whether it's mainstream media or whether it's everything supposedly independent media, at least those who've got, shall we say, the most audience share, be it Russell Brand, Tucker Carlson, I did that in reverse order, which is interesting, so it threw me off, Jimmy Dore, and many others that kind of trickle down from there. It's like they've created this hive thing, and they've created a scenario, kind of stimulates from Joe Rogan and then goes through Tucker, and then it kind of goes through, all of these other sort of what I would call vectors, and they're all kind of echoing each other's same points. And ultimately what they're doing is they're telling you that, yeah, there's indeed a dark force. There's an authoritarian kind of dark evil force willing to go the distance and already has to take your money, to take your guns, to take your liberty, to take your freedom, all of those sorts of things. And so they're all anti-authoritarianism or anti-corporatism or anti what they now have built pretty much all of their points around. And if you understand their points, they're basically, it's the way I'm interpreting it is if you're a Tucker Carlson or a Russell Brand and you've got millions and millions of audience share, I'm sure they've done so much research to know what their audience is responding to in terms of the issues, whether it's big pharma, whether it's, all things related to COVID and that sort of thing, because everybody experienced that. But 9 times out of 10, they all arrive that, yeah, there is a financial force behind the scenes that's in control. And they like to put a lot of the blame on BlackRock. And they're not wrong. But they don't know how to tell you who BlackRock is, nor do they understand what BlackRock does. And they don't understand ultimately what it means. I do. And so they're all basically grasping at straws, again, to sell you against authoritarianism while making it okay to be fine with authoritarianism. What I call that is corruption burns and fuels fascism. And I'm trying to lead a populist tidal wave crusade to build this mass awareness and then action to purge corruption and to drown the fascism it fuels. And the way I do that is with the information that I have, that if you're in the Julian Assange sort of arena and you understand that he's being charged with espionage for revealing state secrets and all of these types of things and what it means for journalism and free speech and many other sort of very important things that we got to wrap our heads around, not to mention who's really in control of the judiciary and then ultimately what kind of sentences can be rained down for what. But ultimately, when you think of what Julian Assange did, at the base of it, the core of it is he provided information. Now, was it information that was corroborated and, that it was, not just corroborated, but that we know that it's evidence, that it's real, it's not fake, that sort of thing? Yeah. But it was also hard not to, basically, based on the speed of evidence or the internet and technology, to see an Apache helicopter, firing on guys that are basically putting their hands in surrender. At least that's the way it looked, okay? But in the fog of war, all sorts of crazy ass stuff can happen. But I'm not saying it didn't happen. I absolutely believe that the American military was approving through channels, firing on, those that were surrendering. I mean, that's part and parcel to this information that Julian Assange had provided and now is being, in the crosshairs. That ultimately, somebody like Donald Trump, and this is the irony of Tucker Carlson, and maybe Trump will, spin at some point because of the position that Tucker Carlson is taking on Assange. But ultimately, Donald Trump once, and he has, said, I want to take out my enemies in journalism, this is how he would do it, most likely through espionage and probably other goon sort of scenarios, to take out his political enemies, many of which he holds in the utter worst regard, which would be journalism, telling the stories of Donald Trump. And yet, all of this is generating millions of eyeballs and awareness and engagement. And ultimately, all of these scenarios, including Elon Musk and X and the platform and all of the manipulation of algorithms and everything else, it's molding millions of people like cattle or chattel and driving them to a position to where it's like, look, we all have, and this is what's going to happen in the 2024 election, we've got a lesser of two evils election once again. And no matter what our issue is, no matter what's going to happen at the end, that at the moment is the way it's going to play out. And then most notably, I would imagine Biden's going to win under those circumstances, or Trump wins and then Biden says, no, I'm not leaving. How ridiculous would that be, all things considered? It's no laughing matter. We're in chaos because of the scenario that what I'm revealing to you is the core of it all. And so when I say that when you understand who I am and what I've done and what I'm revealing to you, it's so beyond state secrets that thousands and hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands and possibly millions are excited about as it relates to Julian Assange. But this is monumentally bigger, and I can't get your attention, and I have to. And that's what's been going on here. I don't know, because I know everything is against me. I know that I'm pushing up a boulder to the top of Mount Everest backwards without shoes on, but I need to convince tens of millions of you to join me so we can push that boulder on the other side to where it becomes this large snowball. We get the momentum. It becomes this unstoppable force, and we take out the corruption and the fascism just like it's trying to take us out. That's the battlefield. And how do I get us there? Well, ultimately, by way of state secrets, I mean, this is what's so insane. As I just mentioned, that entire apparatus that follows and basically follows the lead of Tucker Carlson, in the end, through all of these hot button issues that they do, from immigration and, whatever trans and blah, 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 is, which in many cases is important to many people, but they're trying to fearmonger you into knowing that there is a dark force of authoritarianism that you have to run from and fight to be able to maintain your liberty. But meanwhile, they're just driving you into another authoritarian force. And so what I say is corruption burns and fuels fascism. And that's what we're in the midst of. But while they're all gaming out your brain, and whether it's Alex Jones being reintroduced to X and him talking about like these neuro sort of mind control vectors and all of the strange shit that he does in between all of his other shtick that everybody else is involved with, because what they've learned is that there's nodes that people pay attention to. The far right insane crazies follow, Alex Jones, even though Alex wouldn't describe himself that way. Alex Jones thinks of himself as more in line with kind of like anti-war liberals back of our day, because we're about the same age, where they were kind of anti-war. And he's proved that time and time again in terms of going against the anti-state. But he always ends up at several weird postulations that start, quite frankly, with Rothschild, then goes into things like, Soros, both of which, of course, are the evil Jewish empire, in that world. And then ultimately, all of the other gamesmanship that he's doing, on top of claiming that he's bankrupt because he can't afford to pay the families of Sandy Hook and all that crap. But meanwhile, he's gaining momentum, and I wonder where the money's coming from. From regular people subscribing to his channel, the same people subscribing to Tucker Carlson's channel? Or might there be, big money that depends on what it is that they're trying to get all of their people to not be a threat against, which is the ultimate global paradigm, predicated on oil and military-industrial complex, of which they pretend to be against, but they're not really, but they are kind of, and it depends on the day and what they're arguing about. So it's all a mess, and it's all ridiculous. And then what's the difference between them and mainstream? Do they just pop out of thin air and then find millions of people willing to listen to them because mainstream's doing its job so well? Of course not. Mainstream has made it its job to show that Donald Trump defrauded the United States using deceptive acts and practices, which included all sorts of monumental documentation fraud, an electric scheme to steal the election, on top of everything else he's involved with, which is all why I show you Wall Street got away with. That's what the con is. www.thecon is. Everything, www.thecon.tv. Everything that the mainstream media and the American government is telling you Donald Trump is guilty of is exactly what I'm showing you Wall Street is guilty of, but only on a scale that is like comparing, Donald Trump, which would be a sand, a mineral of sand on the beach, and what I'm giving you is the universe of how this damn corruption works. And when I say deep state, I'm talking monumentally deeper than Deep Throat during Watergate. I'm talking monumentally more widespread than everything that we saw during Contragate or the savings and loan crisis or Enron or any of the others that preceded it. The great financial crisis of 2008 was the system. And because we gave them illegally tens of trillions of dollars through the Federal Reserve's lender of last resort capacity made possible by Federal Reserve Act 13.3, we provided tens of trillions of dollars illegally to this system, and then we never brought any criminal charges against them. So what we did was we doubled down on what many believe to be our democracy, but I have since tried to educate you is a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses, which is the mafiocracy, which uses socialism, the full faith and credit of the United States, to guarantee its control of everything. And now they're fueling fascism. And so it's this binary war between us and them, but us and them are all working for the Borg. I'm the only true threat. And so if you find yourself on the side of, we've got to save free speech and Assange is the pathway to get there, I would encourage you to understand the con at www.thecon.tv and the revelation that I continue to provide to you. Because we all know the system is rigged. We all know that somebody did something somewhere, but we don't understand widespread systemic corruption. You don't understand deregulation through decriminalization, which is the ability of our government to do things that are just incredibly Machiavellian and incredibly confusing. So you would think that it's illegal to steal. You would think that it's illegal to set somebody up in a lie and then steal their property. You would think. And for most case, it is. Except that it might not be because of different statutes and laws and things that we've sorted through and we've sorted out and we still, but the bottom line is like, look, man, the thing about, and this is really the most disappointing to me, and I'll just say it directly to them if you happen to be watching, if you're a professional attorney that works for the machine and then you use all of your abilities to basically further corruption, then you're complicit in the corruption. And that's why whistleblowers are so important, because whistleblowers tell us exactly what's happening on the inside, which I've put front and center in a way that nobody else has, in a way that provides even news to this day, even though we've been released for over 3 years now, that still the American people don't get. That's monumentally bigger than Watergate. It's like, I mean, there is no comparison. I said a minimalist on a grain of sand, compared to the universe. I mean, I'm not kidding. This stuff is so huge. And what I've got to do is convince you, the American people, to come on board, to ally with us, to have this as your sort of defining moment in your life, particularly your political life, but hopefully really everything that you've dedicated yourself to, because everything that we reveal to you influences and it creates what you're in the midst of. And what the Supreme Court has decided back in 2011 through Citizens United is that the only way you have a voice is your money. And so billionaires spend billions to loot trillions. I, through my methodologies as a producer, was able to put together, the 29, well, let's call it the $33 trillion truth initially, that became the $49 trillion truth because of the emergency measures of the Fed through Federal Reserve Act 13.3 and quantitative easing, made possible by the same scenario. And then ultimately so much that have happened since. It's a $70 trillion revelation of organized crime. That is our system that has complete control. And you can't be befuddled by that because you all know it, but you're like, okay, but I'm going to go follow Alex Jones. I'm going to go follow Tucker Carlson. I'm going to go follow Green. I'm going to go find this shiny object over here. But meanwhile, the system in the machine just keeps on doing what the system in the machine does. And the way that the only way we can throw, we can throw something into the machinery, to stop it, is with the truth and tens of millions of people that understand it, which is exactly what I'm providing to you. And we've got to do this to the American people directly. And so why does money have anything to do with this? Well, because again, if you're not invested, what are the options to be able to make things happen? I got to go to people with money, which I already did. I went to a billionaire to get the 29, 33 trillion, $70 trillion truth, which is a hell of a great return on investment if only tens of millions of you bought in, which you don't because you all buy lies. All the American people buy our lies. And the American dream, I can tell you firsthand, dies where power lies. And so I'm trying to create an exodus against corruption and a resurrection for the American dream. And failure is not an option. Because look, guys, you have to be involved. You have to understand. You have to understand what this is, to understand what they're telling you so that you can understand how they're lying to you. I know it seems confusing, but it really isn't in the long run. I always, liken it to, hey, if your wife was cheating on you and I gave you the evidence of how she did it and when she did it and what she did and all of the other things, then you have a much better option of making a choice in your best interest, whatever that answer might be, right? That's the same thing I'm doing for you, but we got to move beyond that because we've got to create a divorce from corruption, quite frankly. And the only way we're going to do that is if you get involved. What I'm really looking for, because I've laid this all out in my truth bombs before, but the number 13 is representative of the original 13 colonies that fought to create separation of powers in order to form a more perfect union. And they did so with blood and guts and treasury and courage and character and sacrifice. And that's what this country has been doing nonstop from its inception against all of the natural tendencies of evil, which people do, particularly when they get power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. You cannot have liberty and justice for the people without the integrity of law. So $13 is your investment. If you can get 13 more people as we move forward, we've got to build this consensus of people and millions of people equipped with the truth to overcome the millions upon millions of deceptive lies every day that happen every day by this system, this machinery of lies between mainstream media and then the supposed independent media that's being funded by all sorts of dark billionaire figures to bury you. We're the voice of the American people to try to create a clean new deal. I encourage you to reach out to me, PM me. If you want to know more information, check out all my work. It's all pretty much there. But we need to build the numbers, and we need to build the numbers of money so that we can actually do this. And what are we going to do? We're going to create a national barnstorming tour where we present the information, but ultimately we have to build a consensus, a groundswell to build a presidential candidate that can give us an option of the lesser of two evils to be able to present all of this information to the American people to potentially get in the position of power, to be able to do the investigation in Congress, to initiate the investigation on behalf of the American people, to root out all of the corruption first and foremost. And then once you understand that we've already spent $70 trillion for insane, calamitous grift to all the wrong people, which are a tiny fraction of our society. Once you understand that, then once you could understand what the possibilities are. What could we do with $70 trillion in the infrastructure and education, public education, and healthcare, and all of the other sort of apparatuses of modern society to create a dynamic, functioning society? You might think I'm inferring socialism. I'm really not, because I can tell you right now the system we have is socialism for the grifters and the cheaters at the top that can do it with impunity because the law doesn't exist, which means the United States doesn't exist, which means we're not a democracy. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that is the mafiocracy that uses socialism to fuel itself, to control itself, and now it's creating fascism. Corruption burns and fuels fascism. So if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, if we who live for integrity and dignity and decency and ultimately beauty, and then we combine in unity, we can defeat the tyranny of misery, and that's our destiny, which is the clean new deal. And the only way we can do that is to take all of the facts I have that we spent millions upon millions of dollars doing to the American people, an American barnstorming tour, which is kind of Lollapalooza, like 3.0. And we wind up in the Washington Monument next year under the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, who said, "A nation not by and for the people cannot and shall not perish from this earth." That's who I am. That's what I do. That's what I do every single day as a muckraking journalist. This is Muckraker Media on behalf of the American dream to create a clean new deal. And if you invest today and every day and come on board, and if you want to invest more, we welcome that too. But we cannot be, we cannot be working with small independent groups of millionaires, for example, for an outcome that's going to basically get a sort of outcome that's no different than everything else that's come before. The American people have to be in the mix. You have to awake to create what Russell Brand calls the Great Awakening, but I call the Great Reckoning. The Great Reckoning. I can't even speak. The Great Reckoning. Thanks for listening, guys. Happy New Year. I hope all is well. Best wishes to you all in the coming new year. I hope to have you on board at your earliest possible convenience. And I'll say it again, like I started off with, and I got to close with this because I was just thinking about it. Look, Oppenheimer, if you've seen the movie, you'll understand more. But Oppenheimer was the lead theoretical physicist that created ultimately the vertical that the American government spent $2 billion in 1936 onward, 37 probably, to create the opportunity for the United States to get the nuclear bomb and nuclear technology. And what did that do for the world? Well, it gave the United States the upper hand for quite a while. And to a degree, it still does, but it also unleashed all sorts of, horrific potentialities and realities and that sort of thing. But the process of getting there had to happen through a commitment of the government to take what was theoretical and make it real. That's what we're doing with this movement. This is the Manhattan Project to destroy corruption. So failure is not an option. Rise, roar, revolt, onwards and upwards. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. This is the righteous grind. It's not rocket science. It's racketeering. Onwards and upwards. Thank you. All the best.